20 days. That is how long Nancy Guthrie has been missing as of today. 20 days since she disappeared from her Catalina Foothills home in Tucson, Arizona, on the night of January 31st, 2026. 20 days during which investigators have been working around the clock, deploying every available resource, following every lead, analyzing every piece of evidence that has emerged from what has become one of the most intensively investigated missing persons cases in recent American history. And in those 20 days, the investigation has developed in ways that few people outside law enforcement fully understand. Evidence has been collected, cataloged, and analyzed with forensic precision. DNA has been processed through multiple laboratory systems. Databases have been searched at local, state, and federal levels. Suspects have been identified and investigated. A 40-name list has been compiled through the convergence of multiple investigative threads. Retail transaction records have been subpoenaed from one of the largest corporations in America. Digital forensics teams have been examining patterns of online surveillance that may extend back 8 months before Nancy disappeared. And multiple investigative threads that began separately, pursued by different teams using different methodologies, are now converging in ways that suggest investigators are closing in on the person responsible. This is not speculation. This is not theory. This is not the kind of vague analysis that treats every development as equally significant without understanding the investigative context. This is a comprehensive, detailed examination of where the Nancy Guthrie investigation actually stands right now, based on confirmed reports from credible news organizations, official statements from law enforcement agencies, and the documented evidence that has emerged through 3 weeks of intensive investigative work conducted by the Pima County Sheriff's Department, the FBI, and supporting agencies at every level of law enforcement. The Walmart backpack that was identified as being sold exclusively through one retail chain, creating a traceable connection to purchase records and security footage. The DNA extracted from the black glove found near Nancy's home that has been analyzed, entered into national databases, and is now being used for advanced forensic genealogy after traditional database matching failed. The Google search patterns that Fox News reported finding in public trends data showing what appears to be surveillance of Nancy's address going back to June 2025, searches that, if real and traceable through legal subpoenas, could demonstrate months of planning and target selection. The FBI's 40-person suspect list that agents have been working methodically, visiting gun stores with names and photographs, conducting background investigations, and pursuing every connection to the evidence from the scene. The official clearing of Nancy's family, including Tommaso Cioni, who was the last person to see her alive. A clearing that removes an entire category of speculation and allows investigative resources to focus on leads supported by actual evidence. And the forensic genealogy work that is happening right now in the wake of CODIS returning no match, work that uses the same techniques that identified the Golden State Killer, and that has solved hundreds of cold cases in the 6 years since that breakthrough. If you want to understand where this investigation actually is, what evidence investigators are working with right now at this very moment, how close they may be to identification based on what is publicly known about the status of various investigative threads, and what the next steps are likely to be as the DNA analysis progresses, and as retail records and digital forensics produce actionable intelligence, then you need to subscribe to True Crime Vault right now. This channel provides comprehensive, evidence-based coverage of major cases without speculation and without the kind of sensationalism that treats every rumor as fact and every theory as breakthrough. Just facts, systematic analysis, and the real investigative process as it actually unfolds in major criminal cases. Hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications, because this case is developing rapidly and major developments could happen at any time as forensic genealogy narrows candidate lists, as Walmart transaction records are cross-referenced against other evidence, or as any of the multiple investigative threads produces identification. Hit the like button as well, because it helps this detailed coverage reach everyone who wants to understand what is actually happening in this investigation, rather than speculation about what might be happening. Now let us go through every major piece of evidence systematically and thoroughly, examine what each one tells us about the investigation and about what happened to Nancy, and assess where the investigation stands after 20 days of intensive work. To understand where the investigation is now, we need to start with what happened on the night of January 31st and the early morning hours of February 1st, because the timeline and the evidence from that night form the foundation of everything investigators have been building since. Every investigative decision, every resource allocation, every analytical priority traces back to what the evidence from that night established about the nature of this case and about what kind of investigation would be required to solve it. Nancy Guthrie was dropped off at her home by her son-in-law Tommaso Cioni at 9:48 p.m. on January 31st, 2026, after dinner at his and Annie's house. This is not an approximation. This is a precise timestamp documented by security systems and confirmed through multiple sources. The garage door at Nancy's home closed at 9:50 p.m., 2 minutes after she was dropped off. Security systems at the property registered normal operation throughout the evening. The cameras were functioning, the motion sensors were active. The technological infrastructure that monitored Nancy's home was operating as designed. And for approximately 4 hours after she arrived home, nothing unusual occurred that the available technology detected, or that neighbors reported, or that any evidence subsequently discovered would suggest. Nancy was home. She was, as far as anyone knew at that moment, safe for the night. The systems were functioning normally. Everything appeared to be exactly as it should be in a quiet residential neighborhood late on a Friday evening. There was no indication, no warning, no sign visible to anyone monitoring the systems or to anyone in the surrounding homes that anything was about to happen. Then, at precisely 1:47 in the morning on February 1st, the doorbell camera at Nancy's home disconnected, not due to a power outage that would have affected other systems, not due to a network problem that would have produced error logs indicating connectivity issues. The camera simply stopped functioning at that exact moment in a way that the initial investigation could not immediately explain, because the physical device had been removed from the property. For the first days of the investigation, before the FBI announced the successful recovery of footage, there was uncertainty about whether any visual record existed of what happened at that camera at 1:47 a.m. Nancy did not have an active cloud storage subscription for her Google Nest camera system. Without that subscription, footage is not automatically saved to Google's servers in the way that it would be for paying subscribers. The assumption initially was that when the camera was physically removed, whatever it had recorded was lost with the device. But more than 10 days later, on February 11th, the FBI made an announcement that changed the investigative picture significantly. They had recovered footage from the camera through what FBI Director Kash Patel described as back-end systems. The technical details of how this recovery was accomplished have not been fully disclosed publicly, which is appropriate given that revealing specific forensic techniques can compromise their use in future investigations. But experts consulted by NBC News explained that in some cases, it is possible to recover data from the complex infrastructure that underlies cloud-based camera technology, even when users do not have active subscriptions. Google Nest cameras, even without paid cloud storage, maintain connections to Google's servers for various technical and operational purposes, device health monitoring, software updates, basic functionality checks, and in some cases, fragments of data, thumbnails, low-resolution previews, or other technical artifacts can exist in back-end systems even when full footage is not being saved in the user-accessible cloud storage. The FBI's digital forensics specialists, working with Google's engineering teams and using legal process to access systems that are not publicly available, were able to recover usable footage showing what happened at Nancy's camera at 1:47 in the morning. That footage, when it was released publicly on February 11th, shows a specific individual at Nancy's camera at the exact moment it disconnected, a person wearing a mask that completely covers their face, preventing any possibility of visual identification through facial features, wearing gloves that cover their hands, preventing the deposition of fingerprints on surfaces they touch, carrying a backpack on their back, a backpack that would later be identified as a specific model sold exclusively at Walmart stores, and carrying a gun, a firearm visible in the footage, held by the masked individual as they approached the camera. That person reached the doorbell camera and did something to it, some action that caused it to cease functioning at that precise moment. Whether they physically disconnected wiring, whether they removed the device from its mounting immediately, whether they covered the lens or disabled it through some other method, the result was the same. At 1:47 a.m., the camera went offline, and the footage recovered by the FBI shows exactly who was there when it happened. This is not inference. This is not reconstruction based on circumstantial evidence. This is documented visual evidence, recovered through advanced digital forensics, showing a masked, armed, gloved individual at Nancy's property at the moment the first surveillance system went offline. It is some of the most direct and unambiguous evidence available in this investigation, and it has driven many of the subsequent investigative decisions, including the focus on identifying the backpack and the intensive effort to develop suspect lists that can be compared against physical characteristics visible in the footage. At 2:12 in the morning, 25 minutes after the first camera disconnected, software on another camera somewhere on Nancy's property detected movement. Motion sensors are typically separate from recording functions in modern security camera systems. The motion detection uses infrared sensors or pixel change analysis to identify when something moves through the camera's field of view. That detection can function even when recording capability has been compromised. At 2:12, the system registered that something was present, that movement occurred, that the sensor detected a change. But no video was recorded, or no usable video was available for investigators to review when they examined the system. This suggests that whoever was at the property had dealt with multiple cameras, not just the doorbell camera. They had disabled or compromised the recording capability of at least one additional camera while leaving its motion detection active, or the system configuration was such that detection occurred but recording did not for technical reasons that investigators have not explained publicly. The fact that motion was detected at 2:12, 25 minutes after the doorbell camera went offline, tells us something about the timeline. Whatever the person was doing during those 25 minutes, they were still at or near the property at 2:12. They had not left yet. They were still engaged in whatever actions they came to accomplish. At 2:28 in the morning, 16 minutes after the motion detection at 2:12 and 41 minutes after the first camera went offline at 1:47, the application connected to Nancy's pacemaker disconnected from her phone. This technological event is significant and warrants detailed explanation, because it potentially tells us something specific about what was happening to Nancy at that moment. Modern cardiac pacemakers are sophisticated medical devices that do more than just regulate heart rhythm. They are also monitoring devices that collect continuous data about the heart's performance and that maintain digital connections to external monitoring systems. Nancy's pacemaker was connected to a companion application on her smartphone. This application maintained a persistent Bluetooth or similar near-field wireless connection between the implanted device and the phone, allowing the pacemaker data to be transmitted to the phone and from there to her cardiologist's monitoring systems through cellular or internet connectivity. These connections are designed to be persistent and automatic. As long as the pacemaker and the phone are within range of each other, typically within a few feet to perhaps 30 or 40 feet depending on the specific technology and environmental factors, the connection remains active. The application does not disconnect randomly or casually. There are specific conditions that cause disconnection. The phone moving out of range of the pacemaker, the phone being turned off or losing power, the pacemaker itself experiencing something that interrupts its communication capability, or in some system configurations, a deliberate action to disconnect the application. At 2:28 in the morning, that connection was severed. Nancy's pacemaker and her phone were no longer communicating. Something changed at that moment. Either Nancy and her phone were separated by a distance greater than the connection range, meaning she was moved away from the phone, or the phone was moved away from her, or the phone was turned off, perhaps by someone who understood that functioning phones transmit location data and maintain connections that can be tracked. Or something else occurred that disrupted the monitoring system in ways that investigators are still working to understand fully. The timing is significant. 41 minutes after the first camera went offline, 16 minutes after motion was detected by the second camera. At 2:28 a.m., something happened that severed the digital connection between Nancy's body and the technology designed to monitor her heart. And after 2:28, there are no more technological events in the documented timeline. The cameras are offline. The motion detection has stopped registering activity. The pacemaker connection is gone. The trail of digital evidence ends at 2:28 in the morning. When deputies from the Pima County Sheriff's Department arrived at Nancy's home at 12:15 p.m. on February 1st, more than 9 hours after the pacemaker disconnection, they were responding to a missing persons report. Nancy had not appeared at church that morning, which was unusual because she attended regularly and reliably. Her family had gone to her home to check on her. They found her missing. They called law enforcement, and deputies responded to what was initially categorized as a welfare check that became a missing persons investigation. But within a very short time after arriving at Nancy's residence and entering the home, something changed dramatically in how the response was conducted. The scene was secured with crime scene tape. Additional units were called to the location. Homicide investigators were summoned from wherever they were that Saturday afternoon. The FBI was notified and asked to become involved. And the home was sealed and processed not as simply the last known location of a missing person, but as an active crime scene where something serious and potentially violent had occurred. That escalation happened fast. Too fast to have been a routine progression through standard missing persons protocols. Too fast to have been a decision made after hours of investigation and consultation and deliberation about how to proceed. Something at that scene, something visible to the first responding officers within a short time of their arrival, told them that this was not a case of an elderly woman who had wandered off or who had gone somewhere without telling anyone. This was something that required immediate escalation to homicide investigation and federal involvement. What did they find? Some of it has been made public through official statements and through media reporting that has been confirmed by law enforcement sources. Other details remain confidential for investigative reasons. Let us go through what is known publicly and understand what each piece tells us about why the response escalated so quickly. Bloodstains were found at or near the entrance of Nancy's home. Not inside a bathroom where someone might have cut themselves and cleaned up. Not in a kitchen where a cooking accident might have occurred. At or near the entrance, the threshold, the point of transition between the interior space of the home and the exterior world. Blood in that location is not consistent with accidents or with normal household events. It is consistent with something happening there, with an event that caused injury at that specific point of entry or exit. The blood was documented, photographed, measured, and sampled for DNA testing. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to Nancy Guthrie. This is not ambiguous. This is not uncertain. DNA testing identified the blood as hers beyond scientific doubt. Nancy bled at or near her own entrance. Something happened at that location that caused her to bleed in a way that left physical evidence that investigators would document hours later. The amount and pattern of the blood, while not described in specific detail publicly, was significant enough to be noted in official statements and to be treated as important evidence requiring forensic processing. Blood evidence that requires sampling and DNA confirmation is not trace amounts or minor smears. It is blood that is visible, that tells a story about trauma or injury, that provides information about what happened at that location. The doorbell camera had been physically removed from its mounting, not just disabled or disconnected, removed, taken from the property. The mounting hardware would have shown evidence of the removal. The wiring would have been dealt with in some way. And the device itself was gone, taken by whoever came to the property, presumably because they believed that removing it would eliminate the visual record of their presence. What they did not know, or what they underestimated, was that the FBI would be able to recover footage from back-end systems even without the physical device. But their decision to remove it tells us something about their thinking. They understood that cameras record evidence. They understood that leaving the camera in place might allow investigators to see what they looked like or what they did. And they took the time and the effort to remove it physically, rather than simply disabling it, suggesting they wanted to be thorough in eliminating that evidence. Nancy's personal belongings were still inside the home. Her phone was there, on a surface where she would have placed it, not in a pocket or a purse as it would have been if she were leaving. Her daily medication was there, the prescription medications that she relied on to manage a chronic health condition, medications that she would have taken with her if she were going anywhere that involved being away from home for any period of time. Her keys were there, her purse or wallet. Everything she would have needed to function independently or to leave voluntarily was still in the house exactly where she would have left it when arriving home the previous night. This constellation of abandoned belongings tells investigators something specific and important. Nancy did not leave voluntarily. She did not pack a bag. She did not prepare for departure. She did not gather the essentials that anyone would take if they were going somewhere under their own power. She left or was taken without her phone, without her medication, without anything she would need. That is not consistent with voluntary departure under any interpretation. That is consistent with someone being removed from their home by force or under circumstances that prevented them from taking anything with them. And then there are the conditions at the scene that have not been described publicly in any detail, but that Sheriff Chris Nanos characterized in official statements as very concerning and inconsistent with a voluntary disappearance. What does that language cover? What did responding officers see beyond the blood and the removed camera and the abandoned belongings that made the scene concerning enough to bring in homicide investigators immediately? In homicide investigations and in major crime scene processing, there are often details that are held back deliberately from public disclosure. The reasons vary. Sometimes information is withheld because releasing it would compromise the investigation by revealing details that only the perpetrator would know, details that can be used to verify confessions or to eliminate false tips. Sometimes information is too sensitive or too disturbing to share publicly without a compelling reason, particularly in cases involving violence. Sometimes information is withheld because releasing it would violate the privacy or dignity of the victim or the victim's family in ways that serve no investigative purpose. The fact that Sheriff Nanos described conditions as very concerning but did not elaborate on what those conditions were tells us that there is more to the scene than what has been made public. There are details that responding officers documented, that homicide investigators processed, that contributed to the immediate determination that this was a crime scene requiring serious investigative resources. And those details, whatever they are, remain part of the confidential investigative file. What we can infer from the escalation to homicide investigation is that the scene suggested violence. Homicide investigators are not called to routine missing persons cases. They are brought in when evidence at a scene indicates that violence occurred, that serious injury may have resulted, or that death is a possibility that needs to be investigated with specialized expertise. The decision to call them in on the afternoon of February 1st, within hours of the missing persons report being filed, tells us that what was found at Nancy's home warranted that level of response based on what the evidence showed. Before we continue deeper into the specific evidence threads, take a moment right now to make sure you are subscribed to True Crime Vault and that notifications are turned on. This case is moving quickly, and developments are happening across multiple investigative fronts simultaneously. The forensic genealogy work that I will describe in detail is likely happening right now as genetic genealogists build family trees and identify candidates. The Walmart backpack investigation is producing transaction records and security footage that are being analyzed for matches. The 40-name FBI list is being worked through systematic background investigations and interviews. When any of these threads produces identification, when an arrest is announced, when the case breaks in whatever way it ultimately breaks, you want to be here to understand exactly how it happened and what evidence came together to make it possible. Hit that like button as well. This kind of comprehensive, detailed analysis takes significant time and effort to research and produce, and your engagement through likes and comments tells YouTube that this content is valuable and should be recommended to more people who want serious coverage of major cases. And leave a comment below telling us which piece of evidence you think will be the breakthrough that solves this case. Is it the DNA from the glove being used for forensic genealogy? Is it the Walmart backpack purchase records being cross-referenced against suspect lists? Is it the Google search data if it represents real searches that can be traced? Is it the systematic investigation of the 40 names on the FBI list? We want to hear your analysis and your assessment of which investigative thread is most likely to produce identification. Now let us continue examining each major piece of evidence in the detail it deserves. The first major piece of evidence that has developed since the initial crime scene processing is the identification of the backpack visible in the FBI footage. This happened on February 17th when Sheriff Chris Nanos announced publicly that investigators had definitively identified the backpack as an Ozark Trail Hiker Pack, 25-liter capacity, and that this backpack is sold exclusively at Walmart stores. Let me explain why this identification matters so much and why exclusivity to a single retail chain transforms a piece of evidence from an interesting observation into a traceable investigative lead. When an item visible in crime scene footage or evidence can be identified to a specific brand or model, but that brand or model is available through multiple retailers, tracing who purchased it becomes exponentially more difficult. You would need to subpoena transaction records from dozens or hundreds of different stores across multiple retail chains. You would need to compile purchase data from online marketplaces. You would need to account for secondhand sales, for gifts, for purchases made years ago that might no longer be traceable. The investigative burden becomes enormous. But when an item is exclusive to a single retailer, the tracing becomes manageable. There is one place to go for transaction records, one corporate structure to work with, one set of security cameras to request footage from. Walmart is a massive corporation with sophisticated inventory management and transaction tracking systems. Every sale of every item at every Walmart location creates a digital record that is stored and that can be accessed through legal process. The Ozark Trail brand is Walmart's proprietary outdoor recreation line. It is not sold at Target. It is not sold at Dick's Sporting Goods or at Academy Sports or at REI or at any outdoor specialty retailer. It is not sold directly through Amazon's retail operations, though third-party sellers who originally purchased from Walmart sometimes resell on Amazon. When you see an Ozark Trail product, you know with certainty that it came from Walmart at some point in its chain of custody from manufacturer to end user. The specific model identified in the footage, the Ozark Trail Hiker Pack with 25-liter capacity, has a specific SKU, a stock-keeping unit number that identifies it uniquely within Walmart's inventory systems. Every time one of these backpacks has been sold at any Walmart location anywhere in the country since this model was introduced, that sale generated a transaction record that includes the SKU, the date and time of sale, the store location, and, depending on the payment method, potentially extensive information about who made the purchase. Sheriff Nano stated publicly that the Pima County Sheriff's Department is working with Walmart management to develop leads based on this backpack identification. What does that cooperation actually look like in practical terms? What is happening right now as investigators and Walmart's corporate security and loss prevention teams work together? The first step is the subpoena. Prosecutors working with the investigation prepare a legal subpoena directed to Walmart's corporate legal department, requesting transaction records for the Ozark Trail Hiker Pack in a specific geographic area and for a specific time frame. The geographic area is probably defined as the greater Tucson metropolitan area, possibly extending to all of Pima County or even to southern Arizona more broadly, depending on how wide investigators want to cast the initial net. The time frame is a judgment call based on the condition of the backpack in the footage and on how long investigators believe the perpetrator might have owned it before using it in this crime. If the backpack looks new in the footage, relatively clean and without signs of significant wear, you focus on recent purchases, perhaps the last 6 months or year. If it looks worn and used, you expand the time frame to include purchases going back multiple years. Based on what is visible in the footage that has been publicly released, investigators would make an assessment about condition and set the time frame accordingly. Walmart, upon receiving a properly executed subpoena in a criminal investigation of this seriousness and profile, would treat the request as high priority. The company would assign corporate security personnel and legal staff to work on compiling the requested records. And because Walmart's inventory and transaction systems are sophisticated and centralized, the company can query their databases for every transaction involving the specific SKU across all stores in the defined geographic area during the defined time frame and produce a comprehensive report. That report, when it comes back to investigators, contains several categories of information for each transaction. The date and time the purchase occurred, precise to the second because point-of-sale systems timestamp every transaction. The specific Walmart location where it occurred, identified by store number and address. The register number or checkout lane where the transaction was processed. The total transaction amount, which tells investigators whether the backpack was purchased alone or as part of a larger shopping trip, and critically, depending on the payment method, potentially extensive information about who made the purchase. Credit card and debit card purchases are the most valuable from an investigative standpoint because they create a direct link between a product and an identified individual. When you purchase something with a credit or debit card, the transaction record includes the name on the card number which can be traced back to the account holder, the billing address associated with the account, and depending on the card type and the processing system, potentially additional information about the card holder. If the Ozark Trail Hiker Pack visible in the FBI footage was purchased with a credit or debit card at any Walmart in the Tucson area during the time frame investigators are examining, They will know exactly who made that purchase, where they live based on billing address, and what other items, if any, they bought at the same time. Cash purchases are more complex, but far from impossible to trace. A cash transaction does not create the same direct link to an identified individual that a card transaction does because no payment credentials are involved. But the transaction still occurred at a specific time and place. The register still recorded the sale. The store's inventory system still logged that a specific backpack SKU was sold. And critically, Walmart stores have extensive security camera coverage of all checkout areas. Every cash register, every self-checkout station, every customer service desk where returns or exchanges are processed is monitored by security cameras that record continuously. Footage is typically retained for varying periods depending on the store's policies and storage capacity, but major retailers generally retain footage for at least 30 days and often for 90 days or longer. If investigators identify a cash transaction for the Ozark Trail Hiker Pack that occurred within the time frame they are examining, they can request the security footage from that specific Walmart store for the date and time of that specific transaction. The footage will show who was at the register when the backpack was purchased. It will show their face if they were not wearing a mask inside the store. It will show their clothing, their build, their height relative to other objects and people in frame, their physical characteristics. And it may show them interacting with store employees, with other customers, or with companions, all of which provides additional identifying information. That footage can then be compared to the FBI footage from Nancy's camera. While the person in the Nancy footage is masked, there are still physical characteristics visible: height and build, posture and the way they move, the way they carry the backpack, any distinctive features that are visible despite the mask and gloves. If Walmart security footage shows someone purchasing the backpack whose physical characteristics match what is visible in the Nancy footage, that becomes significant evidence connecting that purchase to the crime. The footage can also potentially be processed through facial recognition technology, though this remains a complex and sometimes controversial investigative tool with limitations and legal considerations that vary by jurisdiction. If the purchaser's face is clearly visible in Walmart footage, that face can be compared to faces in law enforcement databases, to DMV photo databases if legal authority exists to search them, to images from other sources. Facial recognition is not perfect and is not always admissible in court depending on how it was used and what standards were applied, but it can generate leads that are then confirmed through other investigative means. There is also the possibility of purchases made through Walmart Pay, which is Walmart's proprietary mobile payment system accessed through the Walmart smartphone app. Walmart Pay transactions are linked directly to user accounts. When you use Walmart Pay, you are logged into the Walmart app with an account that has your name, your email address, your payment methods, your purchase history, and potentially your location data if you have location services enabled on your phone. Walmart Pay purchases create the same kind of detailed purchaser identification that credit and debit card purchases do, along with additional data about the user's app activity and account history. The investigative process, then, looks like this. Walmart produces a list of every transaction for the Ozark Trail Hiker Pack in the defined geographic area and time frame. That list might include dozens of transactions, or it might include hundreds depending on how popular the product is and how broad the search parameters are. Investigators begin working through that list systematically and methodically. For every credit card, debit card, or Walmart Pay transaction, they extract the purchaser information directly from the transaction record. Name, billing address, payment card details that can be used to confirm identity. For every cash transaction, they request security footage from the specific store at the specific time and attempt to identify the purchaser visually through the footage, through comparison to other known images, or through facial recognition if that tool is used. As the list of purchasers develops, investigators begin the process of cross-referencing it against everything else they know about the case. This is where the investigative threads start to potentially converge. Are any of the names on the Walmart backpack purchase list also on the FBI's 40-name suspect list? If so, that is a significant connection. You have someone who is already flagged as a person of interest through other investigative avenues and who also purchased the exact backpack visible in the crime scene footage. Do any of the purchasers live in or have documented connections to the Catalina foothills area where Nancy lived? Geographic proximity and local knowledge matter because the perpetrator clearly knew where Nancy's home was, knew enough about the property to disable cameras, and had access to the neighborhood. Someone who lives nearby or who has worked in the area or who has other connections to that specific geographic location becomes more interesting than someone who lives on the other side of Tucson with no apparent connection to the foothills. Do any of the purchasers have criminal histories? While the person is not in CODIS, meaning they have not been convicted of offenses that require DNA submission, they might have other arrests or convictions in their background. Prior burglaries, prior assaults, prior weapons offenses. Any criminal history that suggests capability for or propensity toward the kind of crime being investigated becomes relevant to assessing whether someone on the purchase list warrants deeper investigation. Do any of the purchasers match the physical description visible in the FBI footage? Height and build can be estimated from footage by comparing the person to objects of known size and frame. The person in the footage is described by the FBI as approximately 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches tall with an average build. Anyone on the purchase list who matches that physical description becomes more interesting than someone who is significantly taller or shorter or who has a very different build. Do any of the purchaser names appear in other evidence contexts? Were any of them identified through the Google search investigation if that data exists and is traceable? Do any of them appear in cell tower data showing phones that were in proximity to Nancy's home during the critical 41-minute window? Have any of them been mentioned in tips called in by the public? Every available piece of information gets checked against the purchaser list looking for connections. And critically, do any of the purchasers connect to the DNA evidence? If forensic genealogy using the glove DNA produces a candidate list of individuals who fit the genetic relationship to the crime scene DNA and who match age and geographic criteria, do any of those names also appear on the Walmart purchase list? That convergence of DNA and backpack purchase would be extraordinarily strong evidence. The Walmart investigation is not theoretical. It is happening right now. Transaction records are being compiled. Security footage is being requested and reviewed. Names are being identified and cross-referenced. And every purchaser who cannot be quickly eliminated through obvious mismatches of age or gender or location is being investigated to determine whether they might be connected to what happened to Nancy Guthrie. Now let us examine the second major piece of physical evidence, which is the black glove found not far from Nancy's home. The discovery and analysis of this glove represents one of the most potentially valuable pieces of evidence in the entire investigation because it provides DNA that can be used for identification even when traditional database matching fails. The glove was recovered by investigators at some point in the days following Nancy's disappearance. The exact location where it was found has not been disclosed publicly, which is appropriate because that location might contain additional investigative significance that law enforcement wants to protect. What has been stated publicly is that the glove was found not far from Nancy's home, and that it appears to match the gloves worn by the suspect visible in the FBI footage from Nancy's doorbell camera. That apparent match is critical to establishing that this glove is connected to the crime, rather than being a random discarded item that has no investigative value. The FBI footage shows the suspect wearing gloves. Dark-colored gloves. Gloves that cover the hands completely and that were worn specifically to prevent fingerprint deposition on surfaces the person would touch during the commission of the crime. If the recovered glove matches the type and appearance of the gloves in the footage, that visual match combined with the geographic proximity of where it was found to Nancy's home creates a reasonable basis to believe it is connected. Whether the match is definitive or whether there is some uncertainty about whether this specific glove came from the suspect or could be an unrelated item is not something that has been stated clearly in public reporting. But the fact that the glove was sent for DNA testing and that results from that testing are being used in the investigation tells us that investigators believe it is connected and that the DNA inside it is likely to be from the perpetrator. DNA extraction from fabric evidence is a well-established forensic technique that has been used successfully in thousands of criminal investigations. When you wear a glove, you deposit biological material inside it. Skin cells that naturally slough off from your hands accumulate on the interior fabric. Sweat that your hands produce during wear contains DNA-containing cells that transfer to the fabric. If you wore the glove for any meaningful period of time, if you wore it during physical activity that caused your hands to sweat, the interior of that glove will contain recoverable genetic material. The process of extracting DNA from the glove involves several steps that are standard in forensic laboratories. The glove is examined carefully, and areas most likely to contain biological material are identified. For a glove, those areas are typically the interior surfaces that were in direct contact with skin, particularly the palm area and the fingers where contact is closest and where sweat production is highest. Samples are taken from those areas through sterile swabbing that picks up cells and biological material on the swab tip, or through cutting small sections of fabric that can be processed directly. Those samples are then processed through a series of chemical treatments designed to break down the cellular material and release the DNA from the cells. The released DNA is purified to remove contaminants and other non-DNA material. And then the purified DNA is amplified using polymerase chain reaction, or PCR, which creates millions of copies of specific segments of the DNA that are used for identification. For traditional CODIS analysis, the segments that are amplified are short tandem repeats, or STRs, at specific locations in the genome. The pattern of repeats at these locations creates a genetic profile that is unique to an individual, except in the case of identical twins. That profile can then be searched against the CODIS database to look for matches. The DNA from the glove was processed, a profile was created, and that profile was entered into CODIS. The search ran. The system compared the glove profile against millions of profiles in the national database from convicted offenders, from arrestees in states that collect DNA at arrest, and from crime scene evidence from other investigations, and the search came back with no match. No match means the person who wore that glove has never had their DNA entered into CODIS. They have never been convicted of a crime that required DNA submission in any state. They have never been arrested for a crime in a state that collects DNA at the time of arrest. They have never been identified and entered into the system through any of the pathways that populate CODIS with profiles. For many years, a CODIS no-match result would have been the end of what DNA evidence could accomplish in a case. Without the perpetrator in the database, there was no way to use the DNA to identify them. The DNA could still be valuable for exclusion purposes, for ruling out suspects who did not match, or for confirming identity once a suspect was developed through other means. But it could not be used for identification when no suspect existed. That changed beginning around 2018 with the development and refinement of forensic genealogy techniques. And it is that methodology that is being applied to the glove DNA right now in the Nancy Guthrie investigation. Let me take you through the subscription call to action again before we dive deep into forensic genealogy. Because if you are not subscribed, you are going to miss critical updates. Make sure you are subscribed to True Crime Vault. Turn on all notifications. We are covering this case comprehensively, and when breaks happen, you will want to understand the forensic science that made them possible. Like this video right now. Visit our channel to see our other coverage of cases where forensic genealogy played a critical role, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. Now let us examine exactly how forensic genealogy works and how it is being used in this case. Forensic genealogy, sometimes called investigative genetic genealogy, combines traditional genealogical research with modern genetic analysis to identify individuals from DNA evidence, even when that individual is not in any law enforcement database. The technique works because genetic relationships are measurable. When you share a common ancestor with someone, you share segments of DNA that were inherited from that ancestor. The closer the relationship, the more DNA you share. Here are the relationship percentages. Parents and children share approximately 50% of their DNA because children inherit half from each parent. Siblings share approximately 50% for the same reason. First cousins share approximately 12.5% because they share one set of grandparents. Second cousins share approximately 3.1% because they share one set of great-grandparents. Third cousins share approximately 0.78% because they share one set of great-great-grandparents. These are statistical averages, and actual amounts vary due to the randomness of genetic inheritance, but the principle holds across all degrees of relationship. People who are related share DNA in measurable amounts, and that measurable sharing is the foundation of forensic genealogy. To use forensic genealogy, investigators must first convert the DNA profile from the crime scene into a format compatible with genealogical databases. CODIS uses STR analysis. Consumer genetic testing companies like 23andMe and Ancestry Use single nucleotide polymorphism, or SNP analysis, which examines hundreds of thousands of individual positions across the entire genome, rather than just a few specific STR locations. SNP profiles provide much more detailed genetic information that is suitable for ancestry analysis and for detecting distant genetic relationships. Converting from STR to SNP requires going back to the original biological sample from the glove and reanalyzing it using SNP testing technology. Companies that specialize in forensic genealogy, companies like Othram and Parabon Nanolabs, have developed methods for generating SNP profiles from the limited quantities of DNA typically available from crime scenes. If the glove contained enough biological material to create a usable CODIS profile, it almost certainly contains enough to create a SNP profile for genealogical analysis. Once the SNP profile is created, it is uploaded to public genealogical databases, primarily GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. These are websites where people who have taken consumer genetic tests can upload their raw data to search for relatives, build family trees, and connect with genetic cousins. Millions of people have uploaded their DNA to these databases, creating a massive searchable pool of genetic information. When the glove DNA profile is uploaded, the database compares it against all existing profiles and identifies everyone who shares DNA segments with it. The database calculates how much DNA is shared and estimates the degree of relationship. The results come back as a list of genetic matches, ranked by the amount of shared DNA, showing usernames of people who are related to the person whose DNA was in the glove. Those matches are typically distant relatives, second cousins, third cousins, fourth cousins. The perpetrator themselves is almost certainly not in the database because most criminals do not voluntarily upload their DNA to genealogy sites, but their relatives are there. People who share common ancestors with the perpetrator and who uploaded their genetic data to explore their own ancestry. Forensic genealogists then take those genetic matches and begin building family trees. They use the genetic data to understand how the matches relate to each other. They use genealogical records, birth certificates, marriage records, death certificates, census data, obituaries, newspaper archives, church records, military records, and every available source of family history information to trace the matches back through generations to identify common ancestors. When common ancestors are identified, the genealogists work forward, building out every branch of the family tree to identify all living descendants of those ancestors. This descendancy research can produce trees with hundreds or thousands of individuals across multiple generations depending on how many descendants the common ancestors had. The descendant list is then filtered using everything known about the perpetrator from other evidence: age based on appearance in footage or witness descriptions, geographic location based on where the crime occurred and evidence of local knowledge, physical characteristics, connections to other evidence like Walmart purchases or Google searches, any criminal history, employment in relevant fields. Every available filter is applied systematically to narrow the list from hundreds of potential descendants to a manageable number of final candidates who fit all the criteria. At that point, DNA samples are obtained from the remaining candidates through voluntary submission, through collection of discarded items like coffee cups that contain DNA, or through court-ordered samples if probable cause can be established. Those samples are tested and compared directly to the glove DNA. When the match is found, identification is definitive. This process has been used successfully to solve hundreds of cases since 2018. The Golden State Killer, dozens of other murders and rapes that were cold for decades, cases where CODIS had no match but forensic genealogy produced identification in weeks or months. The technique works. It is scientifically valid. It has been upheld in courts. And it is being applied right now to the DNA from the glove in the Nancy Guthrie case. The timeline for forensic genealogy varies depending on how close the genetic matches are and how complex the family trees become. Close matches like second cousins lead to faster identification because the trees are smaller. Distant matches like fourth cousins require tracing larger numbers of descendants. The Golden State Killer case took about 4 months in 2018. Since then, as techniques have improved, some cases are solved in weeks. For Nancy Guthrie, the work is underway. The DNA has been or is being uploaded. Matches are being identified. Trees are being built. Descendants are being traced and filtered, and somewhere in those trees, the name of the person who wore that glove exists. Forensic genealogy will find it. Before we move to the next evidence category, visit the True Crime Vault channel right now. We have extensive coverage of other cases where forensic genealogy was the key. Subscribe so you never miss an update. Like this video. Comment below. Your engagement matters. Now let us continue. The third major category of evidence involves digital surveillance patterns that extend back months before Nancy disappeared. Fox News Digital reported on February 18th that Google Trends data shows apparent searches for Nancy's address during multiple time frames between June 2025 and January 2026. According to Fox News analysis of Google Trends, activity appeared for Nancy's Catalina Foothills address during June 24th and 28, 2025 from someone in Arizona. The address appeared again on January 11th, 2026. There were image searches between March 8th, 2025 and November 30, December 1st, 2025, and someone in Tucson searched for Savannah Guthrie salary between December 13th, 2025. This pattern, if it represents real searches, shows 8 months of surveillance and planning. Someone identified Nancy as a target in June, studied her property visually in March and November, searched her address again 3 weeks before the crime, and researched the family's financial resources in December. But Google issued a critical disclaimer. Google Trends injects random noise into data for uncommon search terms to protect privacy. A spike in Trends data is not definitive evidence that a search occurred. It could be real, or it could be algorithmic noise. What matters investigatively is not public Trends data, but what Google provides when law enforcement serves legal subpoenas for actual search logs. Those logs contain IP addresses, timestamps, user accounts, and location data that can identify who made searches. Whether such subpoenas have been served and what they revealed has not been made public. The January 11th date appears in both Google Trends and in a Neighbors Ring app request for video from that evening. This coincidence suggests that date may be significant, possibly representing a surveillance visit to the neighborhood. The fourth major development is the FBI's 40-name suspect list. Agents have been visiting gun stores with this list, asking about firearms purchases. This tells us investigators have narrowed focus to 40 specific individuals who warrant serious examination. The list likely represents convergence of multiple threads: Walmart purchase data, neighborhood interviews, cell tower data, tips from the public, Carlos Palazuelos detention. The 40 names are being investigated systematically. On February 17th, the Pima County Sheriff's Office officially cleared the family. All family members and spouses, including Tommaso Cioni, are victims, not suspects. This removes speculation and focuses resources on evidence-supported leads. The case has attracted $200,000 in total rewards, $100,000 from the FBI, $100,000 from Milwaukee attorney Michael Hupy through Crime Stoppers allowing anonymous tips. Ransom notes were sent to media, but 2 deadlines have passed. A California man was arrested for false ransom fraud. The investigation has shifted from engaging with ransom communications to pursuing forensic evidence. So where does the investigation stand after 20 days? Investigators have multiple strong threads. DNA is being used for genealogy, which has proven track record. Walmart backpack is traceable. 40 names are being investigated. Google searches may be traceable through subpoenas. Family is cleared. No public announcement of identification has been made, but absence of announcement does not mean investigation has stalled. Major cases develop information privately before going public. Forensic genealogy happens out of view. Transaction records are analyzed confidentially. When convergence happens, when DNA and backpack purchase and other evidence point to same person, identification will come suddenly. The person responsible wore mask and gloves and disabled cameras, but could not control relatives' DNA uploads, could not eliminate Walmart records, could not erase Google search logs, could not prevent witnesses from providing tips. Multiple pathways to identification exist. Nancy has been missing 20 days. The investigation is active. Evidence is being pursued. Resolution will come through patient systematic work happening now. Subscribe to True Crime Vault. Like this video. Comment with your thoughts. Visit our channel. If you have information, contact FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or Pima County Sheriff at 523-551-4900. $200,000 in rewards available. True Crime Vault will cover every development until resolution.